My name is Kevin Zeese. I'm an attorney who is the Executive Director of VotersForPeace.us and a board member of VelvetRevolution.us. Today we're filing complaints against 12 Bush-Cheney torture lawyers in the District of Columbia and 4 states seeking their disbarment. The basic message is that they used their legal license to facilitate a war crime and therefore they should lose their legal license. The complaint's been filed against John Yoo, Jay Bybee, and Stephen Bradbury for writing memoranda supporting torture, allowing torture, as well as attorneys who advised, counseled, and consulted and supported these memoranda, including Alberto Gonzalez, John Ashcroft, Michael Chertoff, Alice Fisher, William Haynes II, Dennis Fife, Michael Mukasey, Timothy Flanagan, and David Addington. The complaints that we filed go along with this document, which is more than 500 pages of exhibits demonstrating their involvement in facilitating torture. You can get the complaints online at disbartorturelawyers.com or at votersforpeace.us. This cadre of torture lawyers colluded to facilitate the abuse and torture of prisoners that included, evidence suggests, deaths of overseas U.S. military facilities. Human Rights Watch reports that 98 people have died in the custody of the United States, in Afghanistan, and in Iraq. Making this even worse is recent revelations showing that these torture victims were primarily being focused on for the question of linking Saddam Hussein to Al-Qaeda, a link that did not exist, as well as trying to find information about weapons of mass destruction in order to justify the illegal invasion and occupation of Iraq. We've asked the respective state bars to revoke the licenses of these attorneys and because they have failed to show respect and obedience to the law, respect for the rights of others, and intentionally or recklessly acted in violation of the law, in the violation of the Code of Professional Conduct. There are several ways that torture violates the law. It violates the U.S. Constitution, the laws of the United States, and international law. These include, among others, the United Nations Convention Against Torture, which says there is no exceptional circumstance whatsoever, whether a state of war, a threat of war, internal political instability, or any other public emergency that may be invoked to justify torture. The Geneva Convention, which the Supreme Court held in 2006, applies to Al-Qaeda detainees, provides due process, and also prohibits torture. The 8th Amendment against cruel and unusual punishment would prohibit torture. The United States Criminal Code, Title 18, has the prohibitions against torture, as well as prohibitions against war crimes, which include torture. Torture is clearly defined under international law. The Convention Against Torture defines torture as any act by which severe pain or suffering, whether physical or mental, is intentionally inflicted upon a person. The torture memoranda did not provide any objective legal advice to the government decision makers, but instead twisted the state of the law so that it was unrecognizable. They even redefined torture, even though it's explicitly stated in the law. These memoranda were so inaccurate that they were more justifications about what the authors and the intended recipients wanted the law to be, rather than assessments of what the law actually was. These laws provide no exception for torture under any circumstances. Moreover, the United States Criminal Code prohibits both torture and war crimes, the latter which includes torture. The Army Field Manual prohibits the use of degrading treatment of detainees. The individually tailored complaints that we filed today outline the specific steps that each attorney took to authorize torture. We decided to take action because the federal government seems unable to take action. The Office of Professional Responsibility has been working on a report on these memoranda for 5 years. The OPR investigation is only focused on 2 lawyers, John Yoo and Jay Bybee, rather than all the lawyers who were involved in facilitating torture. This inexcusable delay is unfair to the public and unfair to the people involved because the consequences of any wrongdoing are diminished. The delay has already benefited the 2 men under investigation. John Yoo now has tenure at Berkeley Law School and recently became a columnist for the Philadelphia Inquirer. And Jay Bybee has a lifetime appointment as a federal court of appeals judge. If the OPR had completed its duties in a timely manner, it is unlikely that either of these appointments would have occurred. In addition to inaction by OPR, the Congress, whose members, at least select members, were briefed 40 times by the CIA, seems unable to take action because perhaps of its own fear of being implicated in torture. And Attorney General Holder testified last week that he approved renditions during the Clinton administration. Renditions meaning that people were taken on the behest of the United States to other countries where they could be tortured. And sadly, President Obama has now decided to hide the evidence of torture by refusing to release photographic and video evidence despite a court order to do so. Finally, the administration's appointment of General McChrystal to be the head of operations in Afghanistan, despite being responsible for commanding a force at Fort Nama in Iraq, as well as special forces that were involved in torture. One reporter described the situation at Camp Nama. An interrogator described locking prisoners in shipping containers for 24 hours at a time in extreme heat, exposing them to extreme cold with periodic soaking in cold water, bombardment with bright lights and loud music, sleep deprivation, and severe beatings. When he and other interrogators went to the colonel in charge and expressed concern about the legality of this kind of treatment and concern that they be investigated by the Criminal Investigation Division of the Red Cross, the colonel told them that this came directly from General McChrystal in the Pentagon, that there was no way the Red Cross could get in. The unit's slogan was, which set the tone for its practices, was, if you don't make them bleed, they can't prosecute you for it. Reportedly, prisoners died in the custody of the troops under General McChrystal's command, and 5 officers were convicted of prisoner abuse. Therefore, the people must act to face up to the issue and restore morality and the rule of law to the United States. In addition to filing these complaints, we are starting a campaign for disbarment, public torture hearings, and the appointment of a special prosecutor. People who want to get involved in this should go to disbartorturelawyers.com and votersforpeace.us. Only by taking the politics out of torture and allowing an independent counsel to pursue the facts and apply the law will the United States recover from these war crimes. Application of the rule of law, beginning with disbarment, is a necessary part of the process of healing the nation. Thank you very much. If there's any questions, I'll be glad to take them.
How optimistic do you think this will actually go?
I think we're setting a pretty low standard when we're saying that if you use your legal license to facilitate war crimes, that you don't deserve to have a legal license. If the United States bar associations are unable to meet that low standard, it's pretty meaningless to have a kind of code of ethics. We're talking here about some of the most serious crimes that you can commit, war crimes that violate all levels of law, international, domestic, and constitutional. And so I think that I'm optimistic that they will face the reality that these people should not have a license to practice law. I'm also optimistic in the long run that there'll be a special prosecutor. I think that the public debate on this is just beginning. The engine is heating up. I think the recent decision by President Obama to continue to hide the evidence shows us there's something to hide. My sadness is that I expect that the United States has not seen the worst of what has occurred in regard to torture. We've not been told about what these deaths were like, people who were tortured by the United States. And so I think the worst is still yet to be uncovered. And so I think as it gradually is uncovered, there will be no way to stop the idea of a special prosecutor, particularly with all the conflicts of interest that the various participants in government have shown.